My name is Tom. I'm 31 years old, and I've been sitting at this desk for the past 2 hours, staring at a piece of paper I found tucked under my coffee mug this morning. It contained a cryptic message with the kind of handwriting your grandmother might have. Neat, unhurried, almost kind-looking. The kind that belongs on a birthday card. It says, "Do you want to join them? Yes/no." I wish I could say I didn't know what that was, and that ignoring it would make it go away. But that would be a lie. I want to tell you my story before I answer. I think that's important. I need someone to know what happened, what I allowed to happen, before I make this final choice. I've been carrying it alone for over 20 years, and I don't think I can do that anymore. So, here it is. I was 10 years old when it started, and I was the kind of kid that the world seemed designed to overlook. We lived on the outskirts of a small town in rural Pennsylvania, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone's business, and also no one talks to anyone. My parents were good people, genuinely good, but they were exhausted people. My dad worked double shifts at the plant. My mom cleaned houses across 3 townships and came home with her hands raw and her eyes already half closed. By the time I heard the front door open each night, I was supposed to be in bed. Most of the time I was. Sometimes I'd creep to the top of the stairs just to hear their voices moving through the kitchen below, the soft, domestic sounds of 2 people winding down. That was almost enough. At school, I was invisible in the way small, quiet kids are. I would keep to myself and not bother anyone, and in turn, they wouldn't bother me. That was the case for a while, until he showed up. His name was Billy Marsh, and I won't bother describing him at length because you already know him. Every school has one. He had a group of 3 others who followed him around like pilot fish, feeding on whatever crumbs of cruelty he left behind. For some reason, I became his favorite target. Maybe because I was small, shy, and easily overwhelmed. Maybe they thought I was easy entertainment. I tried very hard not to show I was bothered, which only made the crying worse when it came. The teachers knew. Of course they knew. Mrs. Harold, my homeroom teacher, had the particular skill of looking directly at something terrible and then finding something urgent to examine on the ceiling. I stopped expecting anything from adults around that time. What I did have, the one thing that was entirely uncomplicatedly mine, was a Ben 10 ball. I know how that sounds. I know. But you have to understand that I didn't have much. My parents' money went to bills and groceries, and any leftover was gone before it was ever really there. My birthday present that year was the ball, and my dad had driven 40 minutes to the next town to find one because our local store didn't carry it. He'd wrapped it in newspaper because we were out of wrapping paper, and he'd drawn a bow on top in marker. He was sheepish about it. He said, "It's not much, bud." I told him it was the best present I'd ever gotten. I meant it. I played with that ball every afternoon in our patchy backyard. I wasn't athletic. I mostly just bounced it and caught it and bounced it again. But it was mine, and the repetition of it was calming. The slap of rubber against my palms. The way the cartoon face spun as it rose and fell. One day, I was sitting outside after school, doing exactly that. Just bouncing. Just breathing. I was happy until I saw a couple of familiar faces. They came from down the road. 4 of them, Billy in front. I saw them and felt the familiar drop in my stomach, that cold pre-storm feeling, and I thought, not here. This is my yard. This is the one place. They surrounded me. One of them, Marcus, Billy's second in command, shoved me from behind, and I stumbled forward, and Billy caught me by the front of my shirt and laughed like I'd done something funny. They took turns, shoving, tripping, calling me names I won't repeat. I tried to fight back. I actually swung at Billy, which surprised both of us. His expression went from amused to something colder, and then he hit me hard enough that I sat down on the grass without meaning to. My vision swam. My lip was bleeding. I was crying, silently, wretchedly, in that way that's almost worse than sobbing. Billy picked up my ball. He looked at it for a moment, then at me, then at the tree line about 50 yards behind the house. He threw it in a long, arcing overhand. It disappeared into the dark between the trees. They left laughing. I lay on the grass for a while, just existing in the particular misery of that moment. The taste of blood, the fading laughter, the late afternoon sky going purple above me. Then I got up, wiped my face with my sleeve and looked at the trees. My father had told me about the woods, not casually. He'd sat me down about it once, in his serious voice, the one he saved for important things. He'd grown up in that town, and his father had grown up there too, and the warning passed down through them like an heirloom. Stay out of those trees, and especially the dead ones. Don't go near them, don't touch them, don't breathe the air around them if you can help it. I asked him once what would happen if someone did. He got quiet in a way that scared me more than any answer would have. The trees take things, he said finally, and they don't give them back. I thought about that warning while I stood at the tree line with a split lip and a hollow chest, and then I walked into the woods anyway. The forest was deeper than it looked from outside. That's the only way I can describe it. The sounds from the road disappeared almost immediately, replaced by a dense, pressing quiet. The undergrowth was wrong, somehow. Brown and matted even though it was only October, like something had been slowly drawing the life out of the soil for a long time. I searched for almost 40 minutes, calling for my ball under my breath, like it could hear me. I found nothing. No flash of rubber between the roots. No cartoon face staring up from a bed of dead leaves. At some point I realized I'd gone farther than I intended. The light had changed, going from dim to something closer to dark, and I turned in a slow circle trying to orient myself. That's when I smelled it. Cinnamon. Sweet and warm and completely out of place in the cold October air, like walking past a bakery on a winter street. I stood there inhaling it, and something in my chest unknotted slightly, some coiled fear loosening despite itself. It's okay, the smell seemed to say. You're okay, this is fine. I never found the ball that night. I made my way back to the house by following the distant rectangle of the kitchen light, went upstairs, and got into bed without eating dinner. I lay there in the dark with dried blood on my chin and let myself cry properly, the ugly, airless kind, until I ran out. Somewhere in that exhaustion, I fell asleep. I dreamed about a version of my life that didn't exist. In the dream, I was still me, still Tom, but I was someone. People at school looked at me when I walked in, and it wasn't to laugh. I raised my hand and had the right answer. I walked down the hallway, and someone fell into step beside me, and we talked the way kids talk when they're comfortable with each other, easy and thoughtless. There was a girl with dark braids who laughed at something I said. There was sunlight coming through the cafeteria windows and falling on a table where I sat with other people. People who wanted me there. It was the best dream I'd ever had. It was also, somehow, clearly a dream. It had that too clean quality, like a photograph that's been overprocessed. But I didn't care. I didn't want it to end. The alarm ended it. I came back to my ceiling, to the gray morning light, to the familiar weight of dread in my stomach. School today. Billy today. Mrs. Harold's eyes finding the ceiling today. Then I smelled cinnamon, and I noticed the note. It was sitting on my bedside table, a small square of white paper, folded once. The handwriting was neat and even, and it said, "Did you enjoy your dream?" Yes/no. There were two little boxes next to the options, like a survey. I looked around my room. Nothing was disturbed. The window was closed and latched. My door was shut. I lived alone in the house most of the time. My parents left before I woke up, came home after I went to bed. But still, someone had been in my room. I should have told someone. I understand that now. Instead, I picked up the pencil that was sitting beside the note. I hadn't noticed the pencil, and I checked yes. I set it back on the table, got dressed, and went to school. That day, Mrs. Harold announced a history quiz. I felt my stomach drop through the floor. I hadn't studied. More than that, I had genuinely no idea what unit we were on. I'd been surviving her class by being invisible, and it had been going fine until this moment, in which she announced she would start by calling on students individually to answer oral questions. I watched her eyes find mine the way a hawk finds a mouse, across the grass, at a distance, with complete patience and certainty. I fumbled through my notebook. My notes were sparse and disorganized, fragments of half-heard lectures, none of it useful. My hands were already sweating. She'd been clear about what another failing grade would mean. Repeating the year, a conference with my parents, my mother coming in from her cleaning job to sit in a plastic chair and hear about her son's failures while her hands were still red from bleach. I couldn't do that to her. I couldn't. I was still rifling through my notebook when I found the note. Same handwriting, same format. "Do you want my help?" Yes/no. I stared at it. Mrs. Harold was 3 students away from me. 2. I checked yes. There's no gentle way to say this. I lost the day. Not blacked out. That implies darkness, unconsciousness. It was more like a jump cut. Mrs. Harold was 1 student away from me, and I was sweating through my shirt. And then I was walking out the front door of the school at 3:15 with my backpack on, and the afternoon sun in my face, and no memory of anything in between. 8 hours. Gone. I stood on the school steps trying to reconstruct something. Anything. Lunch, the hallways between classes, the quiz itself. Nothing. A smooth blank where the day should have been. Had I blacked out from stress? I told myself that. I actually told myself that. Because the alternative was, "Hey." I turned. A group of girls my age were clustered near the bike racks, all of them looking at me with expressions I didn't recognize at first. It took me a moment to identify it. Warmth. They were looking at me with warmth. "You were really fun today," one of them said. "We didn't know you were like that." I opened my mouth and closed it. They smiled, a little uncertainly, and moved on. Mrs. Harold passed me on the steps. She paused. "Good work today, Tom," she said. "Keep it up." I walked home in a daze. Somewhere in my lost 8 hours, I had gotten an A on the quiz. I had apparently been fun. I had apparently been like that, whatever that meant. The logical thing, the sane thing, was that the stress of the moment had caused some kind of dissociative episode, and my muscle memory and whatever buried competence I possessed had carried me through the day on autopilot. People did that. There was probably a name for it. I got home. The house smelled like cinnamon again, though my mother wasn't home, hadn't been home. There was no food cooking. Upstairs, on my desk. "Are you happy?" Yes/no, I was happy. It was the strangest thing. Despite everything, The lost day, the unanswered questions, the wrongness of all of it, I was happy. I checked yes and went to bed. The euphoria lasted 4 days. Whatever I'd been during my lost day, charming, capable, someone worth knowing, it faded back into me, dissolved, and I was regular Tom again by the following Monday. The girls at the bike rack looked through me. Mrs. Harold graded my next assignment with her usual tired disappointment. Billy and his friends were worse than before, maybe because the 4-day respite had made me soft, had let me briefly believe in a version of myself that didn't have to absorb their cruelty. I was sitting at my desk after a particularly bad afternoon. Billy had knocked my tray in the cafeteria, soup and all, and then stood there with his hands spread wide like what, while everyone laughed, when I found the note. Do you want them to stop? Yes/no, I checked. Yes so hard the pencil nearly tore through the paper. Nothing happened. I waited for the lurch, the jump cut, the day disappearing blankness. Nothing. School ended, and I walked home the same as always. Same grief, same weight. But the next day, Billy wasn't there. Neither was Marcus or the other two. All 4 of them absent, and their absence spread through the class, like a held breath nobody knew they'd been holding. Kids who'd never spoken to me in their lives met my eyes in the hallway in this tentative, newly curious way, like they were checking whether it was safe to approach now that the largest predator had left the ecosystem. I didn't question it. I was 10, and I was relieved, and I didn't question it. They never came back. With my newly found freedom, I started speaking with my peers more. One in particular had made a lasting impression on me. Her name was Sarah Voss, and I want you to understand that she was genuinely kind to me for a while. I think that matters. I think the truth of those months is important, even knowing how it ended. She started talking to me about 3 weeks after Billy disappeared. It began the way all 10-year-old friendships begin: proximity and shared boredom. She sat nearby in Mrs. Harold's class, and one day she asked to borrow my eraser, and somehow that turned into a conversation about the Ben 10 cartoon, and she mentioned she had a Winx ball of her own, and the next afternoon we were in the park behind the school passing it back and forth. We weren't a thing. We were 10. We didn't have language for what we were. But she was the first person my age who had ever voluntarily spent time with me. The first person who'd ever asked about my opinion of something and then actually listened to the answer. We talked about TV shows, about which teachers were secretly nice and which ones were performing nice, about what we wanted to be when we grew up. She wanted to be a marine biologist. I told her that sounded incredible. She said, "You're the first person who didn't laugh at that. Those afternoons were the best part of that whole year." Then I heard what she said. I wasn't supposed to. I was coming around the corner of the school building, and she was on the other side with a group of her more popular friends. And she didn't know I was there, and she said, "He's kind of a dork, but I feel bad for him, so." Who would actually like someone like that for real, though? I stood on the other side of the brick wall and just breathed for a moment, very carefully. Then I walked back around the building and went the long way home. I thought about every afternoon in the park. I reviewed them like evidence, looking for the tells I'd missed. The politeness that was actually pity, the patience that was charity, the laughter that was managed rather than real. I found them all. Retroactively, they were all there. I sat at my desk and didn't do my homework. The note was there when I looked up. "Do you still like her?" Yes/no, I sat with it for a long time. Then I checked no. Sarah didn't come to school the next day. I noticed, but I didn't connect it. She'd been absent before. People got sick, had dentist appointments, had family things. She wasn't there the following day either. or the week after that. I asked Mrs. Harold casually where Sarah was. She got a strange look on her face and said the class had been informed that Sarah had moved away unexpectedly. Family circumstances. She was sure Sarah would thrive wherever she ended up. There was no moved-away energy in that classroom. This was different. This was absence with no explanation underneath it. This was a name that nobody said anymore. I started finding notes asking about other people. Do you still like Mike? Do you still like Mrs. Harold? Do you still like your neighbor, Mr. Fitch? I hadn't thought about Mike in months. We were in a school project once and never talked after. I'd never had strong feelings about Mr. Fitch either way. I left those notes blank for a while, until the day Mr. Fitch said something mean about my father in a conversation I overheard, and I went home burning with a specific anger that I'd never felt before. And there was a note waiting. Do you still like Mr. Fitch? I checked no. He was gone within a week. Car accident, someone said. He'd moved away, someone else said. Retired suddenly. Nobody could agree on an explanation, and nobody seemed particularly bothered about agreeing. I began to understand what the notes were. I stopped answering after that. I was 11 by then, and I know what you're thinking. You were just a child, you didn't know. But I want to be honest with you. I knew. Not fully, not in words, but in the way children understand things they don't have language for yet, in the stomach rather than the mind. I knew that the notes asked about people and the people went away, and somewhere in the forest, there was a dead tree that my father had warned me about with a specific fear that I now understood wasn't superstition. I knew. And I had checked no at least 4 times. The notes kept coming. I stopped answering them. They accumulated in my desk drawer, growing into a small stack. Questions about classmates, about teachers, about my parents once. I burned those immediately. The smell of cinnamon became something I associated with dread, the way you learn to dread the sound of a particular ringtone after it only ever brings bad news. I finished elementary school. I started middle school. The notes kept coming, but less frequently. Like whatever was sending them understood that I'd grown wary and was giving me room. The question changed in 7th grade. One morning I found a note that said, "Do you wish to see them again?" Yes/no, just that. No names. I knew who it meant. I folded the note and put it in the back of my desk drawer and didn't look at it for 17 years. Life continued. I went to high school, college. I left Pennsylvania and didn't go back for a long time. I became, through no particular grace of my own, a reasonably functional adult. I had friends, real ones, the earned kind. I had a job I didn't hate. I had an apartment with too many plants and a cat named Gerald who didn't like me but tolerated my presence, which is its own kind of relationship. The notes stopped when I moved, or I stopped noticing them. I'm not sure which. My mother got sick in my late 20s, and I came back to Pennsylvania to help. That was when I found the box, a cardboard box in my old closet, underneath 3 other boxes, sealed with tape that had dried and cracked. My name on the outside in my own childhood handwriting. I almost threw it out. Inside was the stack of unanswered notes. 30 or 40 of them. All the questions about people whose names I'd not let myself think about for years. And underneath all of them, the 7th grade note. The different one. Do you wish to see them again? I sat on my childhood floor, and I thought about Sarah Voss showing me that afternoon light in the park, explaining about marine biology with her hands moving through the air. I thought about how the note I'd checked no on had felt like power. Like finally finally having something to push back with after years of swallowing everything, and how that feeling curdled immediately into something I couldn't name and had been quietly living with ever since. I missed her. The Sarah of those afternoons, before the overheard words. That person was real too. Even if the friendship was complicated, even if her kindness was mixed with something less kind. Real people are like that. They hold contradictions. I'd been too young to understand that. I took out a pencil. I checked, yes. I was standing in the forest. I don't know how else to describe the transition. One moment I was on the floor of my childhood bedroom. The next, my feet were on dead leaves and the air was very cold, and I could smell cinnamon so strongly it was almost overwhelming, thick and sweet and wrong. It was night. The moon was full and sitting low, and it lit the clearing enough that I could see the tree. My father had called it dead and withered, and it was, but that didn't capture it. The tree was enormous. It must have been 70, 80 feet tall, and it was the specific dead that predates memory. The dead that feels like it was never alive. That was always this. Its branches were bare and white and angular, and they spread in all directions like the tree was trying to cover as much sky as possible. The bark was deeply furrowed and extremely light, and there was something moving in those furrows. Shadows that shifted wrong, that moved independently of the moonlight. The tree was so pale that it almost illuminated its surroundings. The ring of dead ground around it stretched maybe 30 feet in every direction. Nothing grew in that ring. Not leaves, not moss, not mushrooms. Just dark soil and small things half buried in it. Things I didn't look at closely, until I was already close enough to see what they were. They were personal objects, a shoe, a child's jacket, something that might have been a toy, and among them, half buried, the deflated and faded shell of a Ben 10 ball. My ball. It had been here the whole time. Whatever I'd thrown into those trees hadn't been lost. It had been taken. Brought here. And at the base of the tree, arranged in a rough circle, were the people I'd crossed off. Sarah, Marcus, Billy, and the other bullies, Mr. Fitch. 3 or 4 others I recognized only slowly. Faces that matched half memories of names I'd checked no on in moments of anger or hurt or thoughtlessness. They were seated against the roots, slumped slightly, their eyes closed. They were breathing. I felt a surge of wild relief they're alive, and then I got closer and I understood. They weren't alive. Not exactly. Their chests rose and fell with a slowness that wasn't sleep. Too slow, too measured, like a metronome set to the wrong speed. Their skin had a quality I can only describe as dormant, like something packed away for winter. And they were smiling. Every one of them, smiling with a serenity that didn't belong on sleeping faces. Sarah was nearest to me. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, cut to about her jaw, and I realized with a lurching shock that she was older. She'd aged, was maybe 30, not 11. Whatever this place was, time moved inside it. They'd been here all those years, and they'd aged, and they'd never woken up. I reached out to touch her arm. The bark of the tree moved. It was the only word I had for it. The furrows shifted and rippled, and in them I saw something. Faces, maybe, or the suggestion of faces, pressing outward from beneath the surface. The cinnamon smell intensified until it was sickening, and I felt something land on my hand. A note, settling onto my skin like a leaf. Do you want to join them? Yes/no, I dropped it. I stumbled backward. I turned and I ran. I ran the way you run in nightmares, knowing the distance is wrong, that the trees are too far apart and too close together. And then I came back to myself on the floor of my bedroom with carpet burn on my palms and my mother calling from downstairs that dinner was ready. I never told anyone. That was 3 years ago. My mother recovered, I helped her through it, and then I went back to my apartment and my job and Gerald, who still tolerated me, and I tried to live my life like someone who hadn't stood in a clearing full of people he'd condemned with a pencil check. The notes started again 6 months after I got home. Same handwriting, same format. Always found in inexplicable places. Under my coffee cup, folded into my jacket pocket, once tucked inside a library book I just bought sealed. The smell of cinnamon on every one of them. Do you want to join them? Every morning. The same question. I've been checking no for 3 years. I mark it firmly, and the note disappears by afternoon, and the next morning there's another one. But this morning I found 2 notes. The first was the usual question. The second was different. I hadn't seen a new question in 20 years. It said, "The ones you left there are waking up. Are you ready? Yes/yes."